So I took a walk this morning, and there's jets flying over, and I have my dog with me, and so there might be noise in the background. But so my pastor has asked us to basically to pick friends or people that we care about, to share with them on Easter Sunday our own Easter sermon, what God has, how Jesus changed our life, what God has done for us, and individually, personally. So that's what this is about. Anyway, I just was thinking as I was going for a walk, like, where do I start? But I guess I'd start with saying that I was raised going to church. So I learned about Jesus from my parents, from people at my church, from the time I was, as far back as I can remember. I'm sure my parents took me to church when I was an infant. But all my memories of going to church growing up, we were in church twice a day on Sunday and on Wednesday. We were there all the time. I went to youth group. I went to all of that. And I believed from a young age that God was real, and that I needed to do certain religious activities to be accepted by God. I needed to be baptized at the church, and I needed to go to church, and I needed to not do the bad things that everybody else did. And so that's what I grew up believing about God. And then when I was in my teenage years, my parents had some trouble and in their marriage, and my own, just my own self-centeredness, and as a teenager and wanting to be cool and accepted and hanging out with my friends and doing things that are bad. And I, during that time, I felt like tremendous guilt and shame for like believing that God was mad at me because I was doing bad things and lying to my parents, and so I had this sense of guilt all the time and fear of God, that he would reject me. And when I was 16, my parents sent me to a youth camp in California. And shortly before that, I had trouble at school, and I lost a dear friend. And so it was kind of a low point. I was hanging out with people who did witchcraft, and I didn't really believe in that. I don't know, I was trying to be cool. And my friends were doing that, so I thought it was cool that they thought it was cool. And I was dumb. And anyway, I went to that youth camp, and while I was there, I was in an auditorium of people that were singing Amazing Grace. And I don't know if you know the lyrics to Amazing Grace, but it goes, Amazing Grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. I once was lost, but now I'm found, was blind, but now I see. And there's a lot of other lyrics, but those are the main ones. And I remember being in that big auditorium full of people singing that song, and I don't know how else to explain it except that I felt that God was saying to me, you're mine, and why are you choosing to follow these people, meaning the people that I was trying to get their approval, my friends. I was trying to get their attention or their praise or their acceptance of me. I just felt like God was calling me to follow Jesus. And I knew the lyrics from that song. I had grown up with it, but when I heard who saved a wretch like me. It meant something to me that day. I felt like a wretch. I knew I was a wretch. I knew I was not a person who loved God or loved people, really. I was kind of drowning in my own self-love or yeah, I just wanted to be loved by everybody instead of wanting God to love me. I didn't care. Anyway, that day I knew in my heart what I had to do is I needed to tell my friends that I decided to follow Jesus. And those were the friends that were doing witchcraft and doing the bad things that I was doing. So I did eventually call my friend. I'll never forget calling her and telling her. And I thought she would hate me and reject me. And she didn't. She just said she wasn't surprised. And I felt such a tremendous weight lifted off of me. I knew that Jesus did the work that made me accepted by God. I knew I hadn't done anything to be accepted by God at that point. I had done all the wrong things in my mind, but I still had a very strong influence from my raising that I needed to do certain things to be accepted by God. So I was kind of in a struggle for a while there. But that was the beginning of Jesus's crash onto my life. I kind of stole that from somebody else. I heard somebody say that she didn't invite Jesus into her heart. Jesus crashed into her life like a train wreck. And I think that's kind of true. I grew up hearing all about Jesus, but the Jesus that I believed in at 16 that I couldn't really explain or understand was totally different than the Jesus that I had heard about growing up. And it took a long time for me to get to know who this Jesus was that I was believing, and who was changing my whole heart, who was changing how I viewed God, how I viewed people, how I viewed myself. And even though I've never seen him. And it's still a mystery to me. It's still a mystery to me that I believe in this Jesus who lived on this earth 2,000 something years ago. He's a very real historical figure. I believe he is the only God-man. I believe he is the only one who could redeem or return a person to their rightful place with God. I believe we were all made to love God with all our heart and to love each other as ourselves, and we don't. And I believe all those things because this Jesus that I've never seen came crashing into my life at age 16 in an auditorium full of people singing Amazing Grace. I didn't do anything special at that point in my life. Like, I didn't go through any rite of passage or baptism or ceremonies or anything with my church. If in fact I started questioning a lot of things about church, that a church I was with, and started reading my Bible myself, and asking questions. And God put people into my life who helped me to learn that what it means to be saved by God because of faith in Jesus. A lot of religious terms that I grew up with and a lot of religious terms I've heard for years just became mantra to me. It didn't mean anything to me. So I sort of began to unlearn all those things and learn to just love Jesus by faith and believe that he is who he said he is, and pray to him and follow him. And anyway, so I guess if I had to sum it up, this is really long. If I had to sum it up, I would say before Jesus came into my life, I only cared about people loving me, wanting me, praising me. I also feared God's judgment on me or rejection of me, and kind of tried to fly under the radar by not doing bad things. So I believed in God based only that he would accept me based on what I did or didn't do. And then when I heard the words Amazing Grace, I believed that Jesus was my Savior, not myself, and that I didn't do anything to be right with God, and that I just believed that Jesus did that he made me right with God, that he paid the price, that he did the sacrifices and the acts and the works that needed to be done to make me accepted by God. And I couldn't have explained it to you that way then, but I believed it. And since then, since Jesus came into my life, it's been years of following what I know about him and learning more. And I would say the biggest thing that's changed in my life since then is that where I feared to speak up because I didn't want to be rejected, I feel like Jesus in me is drawing me to other people all the time to speak into their life, to tell them the truth, to show them the grace that he's shown me. I guess before I didn't really love people or love God, and I just would say the biggest thing that changed is that now I actually find in myself a real love for people and God that isn't for me so much. It isn't like I'm trying to do things to make them happy. It's more like it's coming out of me from somewhere else, from Jesus, that I am wanting to love people and I'm wanting to love God the way Jesus does, self-sacrificingly, with faith that God is able to take things that are broken and make them whole, and that God is doing something bigger than I can see or understand. Anyway, that's really long. I guess thank you for listening to me. And maybe I just ask you if you know Jesus like that, and if you would like to know Jesus like that. Maybe not exactly like I have explained my story, but in the way of believing that he has done everything to make you accepted by God. And that there's nothing else you need to do except just believe him. I guess I would leave it at that. And that would be my Easter sermon about what Jesus has done for me. Thank you for listening to me.